listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in. Glad to have you with me. Thanks for being here as well. As always, LSU, we're going to turn the page football-wise a little bit to Florida. Billy Napier talking his quarterback. Which one might play, but it's an update on DJ Lagway. I have some thoughts on that. And then Brian Kelly at his Monday press conference was asked a question about Caden Durham that kind of centered around something that we talked about here. So want to react to his comments on that and give you some context as well as to what follows. LSU basketball, Matt McMahon and the Tigers hit the road this week for the first time. They head up to Manhattan, Kansas. The Little Apple face off against Kansas State. As I mentioned at the end of Monday's show, we'll start to sprinkle a little bit more of that in there. Coach McMahon is set to meet with the media later on Tuesday. It's a pretty big game. That's the first time you really be able to learn about LSU. They take a step up into power competition. It's third year in a row as well that they've played Kansas State each of Matt McMahon's seasons so far, and there's been some history there. Of course, the game where the clock, stopped or just completely malfunctioned out there in the Caymans, and then you went up to Kansas State again a season ago. So you've had some recent history with that program. Of course, there's the Cam Carter angle as well. So there's plenty to dissect with that game. We'll continue to do that a little bit throughout the week, especially after Matt McMahon meets with the media this week as well. A lot of people excited about that team. A lot of people's interest peaked with that team in year 3 of Matt McMahon. They're off to a 2-0 start. So keep an eye out for some of that content as well here on LSU Daily this week. Be sure to like, subscribe, share. Follow me on social media as well. Greatly appreciated on Twitter at Musso Matthew. Find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram as well at Matthew Musso1. All of that is greatly appreciated. All right. Let's start with the Caden Durham angle before we fully kind of turn the page to Florida. On Monday's show, when we were, I wouldn't even say recapping LSU's loss to Alabama, it was more of a reaction to LSU's loss to Alabama on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, focused in on Caden Durham a good bit because Caden Durham was awesome in the first quarter for LSU running the football. He had 4 carries for 56 yards in the first quarter. Yes, one of them was a 45-yard run. But as we always say, we don't take rushing yards away from backs. The play happened. He earned it. It was a great success. On the very next drive, LSU handed it to him 3 straight times, and it resulted in a first down. So you had the big long run, then you had to grind it out, 3 runs for him. He was finding success. He only carried the ball 4 more times after that. I had told you something that is obvious, and or at least should be obvious, that Caden Durham's your best running back if you're LSU, and he needs to play. Like, Caden Durham had 20 touches on Saturday. That's it. 20. And that has drawn the ire of a lot of people. But what's more is the touches in the red zone for Caden Durham. And that's where the question Kelly was asked really stemmed from, right? It's phrased in a way of, Caden Durham, he got you down there, and he doesn't touch the ball after the 45-yard run in the red zone. Is there a reason you're not featuring him in the red zone as much? Brian Kelly asked for, specific examples of plays. That's when the 45-yarder was brought up. And it's just or why, basically, is Caden Durham not being featured in the red zone? Here is Brian Kelly.
I'd have to know what plays we're talking about, and specifically, you're giving me an example of maybe when he wasn't in the game, but there's no preconceived notion that we've got to take him out of the game when we get into the red or blue zone in those kinds of situations. Frank is moving those backs in and out of the game based upon, what the particular plays are, but there's no kind of thought process that, hey, we're in the blue zone now, let's get him out of the game. If we have anything, it's we believe in his ability in that area to score touchdowns.
Okay, there might not be any preconceived notion, and I have no reason to not believe Brian Kelly when he says that, but it's happening. It is happening. Granted, LSU was in the red zone only twice against Alabama on Saturday. That's just because you got your butt kicked. But Caden Durham didn't have a touch in the red zone on Saturday night in those 2 trips. It goes further. Against Texas A&M, when you're still moving the football. Like LSU moved the ball in that game against A&M. You outgained A&M. You lost by 18, whatever it was. I don't know. I don't remember anymore. I don't care. But you outgained them. Caden Durham had 1 red zone touch in that football game. 1. And it came in the 4th quarter when you were down 28-23. You moved the ball all game. In between the 20s. Stalled out plenty. And your best running back had 1 touch in the red zone in that football game. 1. I get it. He wasn't 100%. Well, he also wasn't 100% against Arkansas. And he had plenty of red zone touches there. You were riding the hot hand perfectly on the first drive of that football game with Caden Durham and Nussmeier. You get down in the red zone. The penalty backs you up. You're right outside of it in the on the 22, which they would tell you, blue zone or whatnot. And he breaks the 22-yarder. As soon as Whit Weeks tips the ball for the interception, gets you to the 2, they turn around, hand it to Caden Durham. He punches it forward into the end zone, touchdown. He scored 3 touchdowns. 2 of them came in the red zone. The other one came just outside of the red zone in that game. I'm not telling you it's going to solve all of LSU's problems. It's not. LSU has plenty of problems, so please do not misunderstand me. But what I am saying is whether it's a preconceived notion or not, and I don't have a reason to believe that it is happening. They are not featuring Caden Durham in the red zone nearly enough. He's not going to score every time he touches the ball down there. There's going to be a few where he gets stopped for no gain. That happens. The field is condensed. They might be expecting you to run the ball on that certain play. Maybe you're predictable by personnel on a play or whatever. Maybe you just lose the battle up front. Things like that happen. But what I do know is to be a successful team in the red zone, you have to have a running game. And when I say that, I'm sure it can get, misconstrued into a total running game. LSU's not going to have a total running game this year. They can't do it. Okay? Even if LSU somehow flips the switch and does great on the ground the last 3 games of the season, they're not playing good defenses. They're just not. Vanderbilt's a scrappy defense. They play really hard. They rally to the football. But they aren't the top rushing defenses that you've seen against Ole Miss or A&M. Alabama was statistically the lowest ranked rush defense you faced all year, and you ran for $104. 104. So, Oklahoma's got a good defense. They're not great. Florida, they're not a good defense. LSU's never going to have a complete running game this year. And I've never, and you know this if you've listened to the show up to this point throughout the season, I've never asked LSU to have a complete running game because they're not capable of it. What I've asked is, can you get the yards when you have to have them? And a lot of times they have this season, and a lot of times they haven't. They've been inconsistent there. They've been inconsistent everywhere. That's why they're 9-3. That's where they are. They're inconsistent. And it, goes into personnel and coaching and all those things. But man, if you're at the 5-yard line, call me crazy. I'm convinced if you have your best running back in the ball game, it increases your chance to score from that point. And for Caden Durham to have 1 red zone touch in the last 2 games, both of which were huge games for your season and your postseason, aspirations and hopes and goals, that's really disappointing and really tough to swallow. Just because you've seen him in the big moment when you need him come through. Y'all, that's how he burst onto the scene against South Carolina. You trusted the true freshman on the road in that game where you were down 17 and scratching and clawing and coming back in arguably the most hostile environment you've played in this season. And he responded. And that's where so much of the frustration comes from with this LSU offense this season. And I'm not going to put it all on Joe Sloan. Does Sloan have some things he needs to improve on? Yes. But this is like his second season ever calling plays. That's going to be a work in progress. You've heard Brian Kelly talk about this. They do this so cohesive with the offensive staff throughout the week. You heard him in that cut about Durham in the red zone, that Frank Wilson's, rotating those running backs in, just like he's always done when he's been at LSU. But what's the source of frustration, I think Durham's a great example of this, is it feels like LSU goes away from things that work. You can go back into the USC game. You saw them have success with little screens out and, not having to pull linemen, just getting the ball to the outside of your playmakers. Aaron Anderson scored a touchdown on that. He would have scored a second one. It was the one throw of the game that Nuss missed. And, you saw a little bit of that again against Alabama, but it took to that point to see it again. Durham against South Carolina, ride the hot hand. Well, why aren't you riding the hot hand after he runs 45 yards? It's Xavier Thomas. The kid gains a first down every time he touches the damn ball. Give him the football. Give him the football. Until someone proves they can stop it consistently, give that guy the ball. So, I think that's just where so much of the angst and frustration and anger comes from in watching LSU's offense. A lot of it stems from them not having the consistency in the running game. But again, I'll say it. They're not going to this year. That's been clear for a while. With this more in focus, keep an eye on Caden Durham getting the ball more in the red zone this week. Just throw that out there. And it'll be too little too late. And regardless of whether he has success or not, I think he'll have some success because I think he's really good. I think he can create. I think he can break tackles. I think he's got a great motor and can fight through. So, I think he will have success. But, and when I say that, I don't mean look out like, I don't want them to force the ball to Durham in the red zone, obviously. Like, you don't want that. But you have to figure out a way to get him the ball down there more. And he's healthy. Brian Kelly was asked about that because you didn't see him much in the second half on his Monday press. And he said, no, like he was out there in the second half. And he was. He just wasn't running the football very much. They were tossing it, throwing it to him. And that wasn't going great either. But he's there. Like, he's there full to go. Nothing happened to him in that game. That's not why his touches were maybe lower or anything of that nature. So just foul that away. You have to put... When I hear Brian Kelly say them putting the team in better positions to succeed, I think having your best running back on the field in the red zone is a pretty good first step to doing that. So we'll see. Just keep that in mind when you watch the game against Florida on Saturday. The other interesting part with the running game, Garrett Dellinger, Brian Kelly said he expects Dellinger to practice this week. He had mentioned that really going into the Alabama game, that they thought there was a good chance. They were optimistic about having him back for the Florida game after that tightrope procedure. So file that away. Keep that in mind as well. We'll continue to update that as the week progresses. Speaking of that Florida game, boy, it's been a trying year in Gainesville for Billy Napier. There's been a lot of injuries, obviously, for the Gators. Specifically at the quarterback position, they're down to their third-string quarterback right now, Aiden Warner, who's a transfer from Yale, who didn't even really play at Yale, and is now getting his first extensive playing time at Florida. He's a former walk-on. He's a walk-on. Graham Mertz out for the season. Then they turned to DJ Lagway. You had seen him a little bit more kind of rotating in with Mertz throughout, but when Mertz went down, Lagway took over. If you're unfamiliar, Lagway was the number one quarterback recruit in the country last season. Has some dual threat ability, but you haven't really seen him run very much at Florida this year. It's mainly been in the passing game, but he did injure his hamstring pretty bad against Georgia. It looked worse than apparently it was. I mean, when I saw the injury in real time watching that game, it looked like he was going to be out for the season. He couldn't put any weight on the leg. They had to, cart him off the field basically for a hamstring injury. It looked real bad. Billy Napier said after that they were optimistic. There was potentially a chance for him to play against Texas just the next week. After that, he did practice a little bit, dressed out, went out for warm-ups, and eventually came back out, not in pads, and he didn't play against the Longhorns. Billy Napier on Monday updated the status of Lagway and mentioned that he went through warm-up on Monday morning. They expected him to practice Monday afternoon, and he is officially day-to-day for the LSU game. Would not give an additional status other than that, I should say, and they're just going to continue to monitor it throughout the week. Kind of similar to what they did leading into Texas. Brian Kelly asked about this on Monday. Lagway, Warner said, yeah, they're preparing for both.
Yeah, you have to prepare for both, right? I mean, it's certainly a quarterback that has a talent that we've seen on film in terms of what he does. We haven't had a lot of games, but we know of him. He can throw the football. He throws a great ball. He's athletic, and certainly we'll prepare for both quarterbacks.
Here's my thing on the Lagway spot, if you're Florida. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Florida should just phone this in. They shouldn't. I mean, they still have a chance to get to a bowl game. They just need 2 more wins. Now, granted, they have LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. It doesn't look likely that that's going to happen, but they are still playing for something. But here's my whole take on that. A lot of times you will see guys go out there and play even when they're not at full strength, right? We know that. Hell, we were just talking about Caden Durham. This isn't one of those situations that Florida needs to do that in. And here's why. Billy Napier has already been given the vote of confidence from the Florida administration. He is coming back in 2025, something that many people did not see. And I would tell you the sole reason he is coming back in 2025 is because of what they were able to see with DJ Lagway working in his system. He is tied to DJ Lagway. That's that. That was his prized recruit of his tenure so far there. You've got to see it on the field a little bit, and you can see maybe what the future can be. Maybe Billy Napier has his quarterback. Lagway fits exactly what Napier wants in a quarterback in his offense. He is tied to Lagway. If DJ Lagway was not at Florida, I don't think Billy Napier would still be at Florida. They are attached at the hip. And because of that, there is no reason to put that kid out there until he is 100% ready to go. The last thing you need is him further injuring himself, not being 100%, and maybe missing extended time. Soft tissue injuries are funny. They are hard to figure out. They are unpredictable, right? I'm not saying I'll be surprised if Lagway plays against LSU. Like, you go through the week, as Brian Kelly said, preparing for both. We'll continue to monitor it, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to play him knowing you already have another year with him locked in if he's not 100%. Because that is, outside looking in, the reason you have that other year. Just file that away, and we'll continue to monitor it throughout. But right now, DJ Lagway, day-to-day versus LSU, and that absolutely changes the dynamic of that football game if Lagway does suit up for the Gators and play. All right, that is going to wrap it up for today. Be sure to subscribe, share, like, all that appreciated. Follow me on social media. Be here next time for more on LSU Daily.